Hey, college wrestling fans, it's JT1 Wrestle here. Here not too long ago, the Swayze and I started talking about NCAA Division II programs we would love to see add wrestling, both men and women's, to their programs, either reinstate or a brand new program. We're both so passionate about NCAA Division II wrestling that we ended up talking over our time. So this ended up having to be a two-parter. So here we are. We've already talked about teams 10 through 4. Now we're going to do teams 3 through 1. So who is your bronze medalist here, Sways?
Well, I actually had it that I have hit my three
Oh, maybe it's
because
my
I
turn then.
so it is your I but for recapping for everybody, I did choose Rockhurst out of Kansas City. Thought it was in a good location to have many opponents. But we'll kick it back over to you, JT, for your number three.
All righty. I'm going to go with West Texas A&M. So, there's a history here at West Texas A&M. It is pretty much, if you go back to like the early, maybe late 70s, early 80s, it was pretty much pro wrestling university. So we had Tully Blanchard, Dusty Rhodes, the Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase, Bruiser Brody, and then of course, Terry and Dory Funk. Now, the reason I'm bringing these guys up is because if you look at the history of the Funks, their father, Dory Funk Sr., was a high school state champion in Indiana, and then he went on to wrestle for Indiana State before eventually moving down to Texas and, starting up pro wrestling down there. Now, I have tried to get Dory Jr. In on an interview because I would love to know the specifics of this. But the Funks were very instrumental in getting high school wrestling started in private high schools down in Texas. And there was some sort of a wrestling program at West Texas. Back in those days, it was called West Texas State. Today, it's called West Texas A&M. I don't know if it was sort of like what the NCAA is today, or if it was strictly an intramural program. I'm not sure. I
Hmm.
have seen photographs, I have read articles on it, but I also know that they weren't officially a part of the NCAA, so I'm not exactly sure how this worked. But anyway, for nostalgic reasons, I would like to see wrestling there. And let's also talk about more practical reasons. That area of Texas has some great wrestling. Some of the best high school wrestling programs in the state are right in that area. We have Amarillo, I think you pronounce it Tascasca. I'm not exactly sure how you say that. You have Canyon Randall, you have Dumas. These are programs that are constantly, sending kids to state, having state champs, state place winners. So you have this area where you could easily recruit, some really good wrestlers there. And also nearby, this is the area of Texas that Olympic gold medalist Brandon Slay comes from. So that's the kind of talent this area produces. Why not give them a place at home to wrestle? We talked about this earlier. Athletic directors and university presidents want a fan base, right? They want, as Sway said earlier, they want butts in the seats. I think you would get them at West Texas A&M because of how prominent the high school wrestling presence is there. Then the last thing I want to add is you could have duels, be able to have a schedule, on the road, not too far away. New Mexico Highlands, only 3.5 hours away. You might know this school, Sways. Central Oklahoma, only 4 hours away. And then 5 hours away, you have Adams State and Colorado State Pueblo. So I think West Texas A&M, that's my bronze medal pick.
Nice. And also, when you go a little bit of a deeper dive, really, you're not far from that southern part of Colorado when you're way out there in Texas. So there's a lot of we mentioned on the first episode of this D2 picks about how Colorado as a state just has so many D2s. And then I know it's just a women's program coming up, but just 3 hours north in Liberal, Kansas is uh, South. No. Oh my gosh. It's slipping my mind now. Oh, this is bad. Liberal Kansas JUCO. I'm cheating here.
All right.
Seward County Community College. Oh my gosh, I should know that. Um, but anyway, they're only 3 hours north of there. So yeah. All right, on to my number two. We're going to go out to the West Coast and get the Sea Wolves of Western Washington University. They're out of Bellingham, Washington. They are only an hour and 14 minutes from Simon Fraser up there in Canada. And this could spark a lot of growth in the Northwest. NCAA wise, you really got nothing. Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana. So the D2 route, NCAA route in general. Now you got some of your big players that are kind of out there. I mean, Oregon State, but when you look D3, you got Pacific. Um, there needs to be more NCAA wrestling up that way. Uh, and overall, there needs to be more wrestling in the Northwest. Um, Same conference as Simon Fraser, and I do think it would be a natural rival for Simon Fraser to guarantee a home duel at least every other year. I know Simon Fraser with other sports. They recently discontinued football. Had a lot of issues though because now their primary conference was the Lone Star Conference. Lone Star Conference, that's Texas. So they got into that so they could start having teams come to them. Well, the problem is out of 100 some Americans, how many do you think actually have a passport when you're 18 or 19 in college? Not a lot. So Simon Fraser would get on a bus because they're Canadian, they had passports and come across and play at a high school stadium just on the other side of the Canada Washington border. So I think this would open things up to maybe help that area and maybe with growth of Division II and other NCAA programs. So that's why I went with Western Washington.
Love that pick, and I agree with you 100% that we do need to see wrestling grow in the Northwest as a whole. But speaking specifically to the state of Washington, if you go back and look at Washington back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, even into the 90s, which isn't that long ago. You and I were around back in the 90s, and we're not that old, so it's not that long ago. Washington used to be a state with a great wrestling presence. And then suddenly you had this team drop, then that team drop, then this team drop, then that team drop. And suddenly there was like no college wrestling in Washington. Now, as you said, Pacific, Evergreen State. We talk about some of these programs that have recently, added or, gotten stronger over the years. So it's not like it doesn't exist at all. I think Pacific's in Oregon, by the way, so my mistake there.
Hmm.
But yeah, that accident just wasn't thinking right. To see wrestling once again thrive in Washington because at one time it was a great wrestling state, and you know I love that pick because that would help wrestling grow in the state of Washington, which is something I would love to see. Now, I'm going to go with my number two team here. And my number two pick here is I'm going to lead in with this story real quick. When people think of wrestling in the South and where it's strong and where it has thrived and where it's popular, I'd say the number one team in the South for all of college wrestling, I'll see if Swayze agrees or not, would be the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Agree?
For Division I?
For all of wrestling. Now, no, hold on a second because I'm don't spoil the surprise here.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, okay.
So I would say that probably Chattanooga is the most popular in terms of success, in terms of who knows where it's at, so on and so forth. By the way, I love Gold Peak tea, so I'm happy to see you drinking that. I drink a lot of that myself. But anyway, I give a lot of credit for the popularity and the growth of wrestling in the South to this team that I'm going to pick right now. My number two pick, Carson Newman.
Oh,
Carson Newman is my number two pick. We're talking about team that began in the 1963-1964 season, and it lasted all the way up into the 2008-2009 season. And talk about success. Three-time National Christian College Athletic Association champions. And then on top of that, they have six top 10 NAIA national finishes, and then three top 10 NCAA Division II finishes. So we're talking about a team that was pretty successful here. And, I've talked with people down in that area before, and they all say that it had a great fan base too. That people came, showed up to the dual meets, that they even followed them on the road and they would show up. There were times I was told by a fan of Carson Newman that there were times when they would go duel another team and they would have more fans in the stands at an away duel than what the home team had. So if that's not a fan base, you tell me what is. And then also just a little fun history here, real quick, before I let Swayze move on to his number one. This is the home of Lazaro Reynoso, who, if you're not familiar with him, take a look at the career of John Smith real quick. We're talking about a guy that won two Olympic titles and then four world titles. During that span of all those gold medals, he lost once. A lot of people are unaware of this, but at the Olympics in 1992, when John did win a gold medal, back in those days, you could still be a gold medalist even if you had a loss. And he did have a loss. He had a 3-1 loss to Lazaro, who came back himself to be an Olympic bronze medalist. So, kind of a cool story there. Furthermore, when we talk about NCAA Division II wrestling and how tough it can be, here's a guy that had beat John Smith uh, in freestyle wrestling at the Olympics. And yet, let's look at, you know, so in 1992, and then he takes a time off from wrestling for a while, and then he's talked back into going out for wrestling again by Jack Spates from the University of Oklahoma, whose daughter spoke Spanish, and she was the one that talked Lazaro into going back out for wrestling. So when he did go back out for wrestling years later, he wrestled from 1997 to 2001, and his NCAA Division II finishes were sixth, second, first, second. So that also speaks to the level of competition that can be seen in NCAA Division II wrestling. So blah 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 goes the JT1 Wrestle. My number two pick, Carson Newman.
I'm gonna go off of that Carson Newman one to just add a little more insight to Carson Newman. Don Aaliyah, the longtime coach there, just passed away last year. One of the most solid individuals out there. Lifetime Service to Wrestling Award in the Tennessee chapter in 2007 from the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. And after his retirement of coaching, he actually created a nonprofit to support wrestling in East Tennessee, specifically the club wrestling team at East Tennessee State University. So he did a lot of stuff. You do mention Lazaro Reynoso. The first national tournament I ever attended, he was in the finals against one of my teammates, and he flipped him around sideways and back again. It was the only national title for Reynoso, who was a three-time D2 finalist, but only won it once. And in that year, he won like 16-4 or something. Somebody else that Coach Aaliyah coached as well. The coaching chain continues. Those of you who might be familiar with the name Frankie James, who has now taken over Georgetown College and was previously at Campbellsville, kind of follows through that lineage of Carson Newman. So, yeah, now I'm getting reminiscing of Coach Aaliyah and just how great of a guy he is and stuff like that. And yeah, it's unfortunate Carson Newman doesn't have a program, but maybe soon he'll be back. All right, number one, we have, well, my pick anyway, the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith. Okay, my reasonings for this: no football. I think that always helps out, and it is exactly on the border with Oklahoma. You could sneeze, and your snot's going to line up in probably one of those holes they do noodling out of. But I really like this because the boom of Arkansas wrestling, Little Rock has really focused that. You're talking about a state that 15 years ago was in its infancy of having programs. Um, they're not far from Fayetteville, Bentonville, which is that northwest part of Arkansas is really solid. You're 2 hours from the Tulsa Metro, so you're going to get a lot of talent there. You're going to get JUCO talent out of Northeast Oklahoma and Carl Albert. Southeast Kansas has two JUCO programs, Neosho County, which has seen better days, and then Labette, which is traditionally a power. And then Southwest Missouri is just tough as snot. So I think the location is great. And they're only an hour from places, hour and a half from Tahlequah, where Northeastern just announced for Division II. And they're 3 hours from Ouachita Baptist, UCO, 3 hours from MIAA team. Not MIAA team, sorry, Great Lakes team Drury. So they would still have some good foes to face that are four-year schools. So I really like with the surge of wrestling and the location of right smack on that Oklahoma Arkansas border, that you could really pump up something really quick and special. Plus, again, military towns. So my two Oklahoma picks are military towns, and so that's why I like the Lions of Fort Smith. They'd be MIAA too, so you'd have UCO and Kearney and all that traveling to them, which would just explode it.
It's been a real, we talk sometimes about the discontinuation of wrestling, but and how heartbreaking that has been, but talking about heartwarming and how exciting and how much fun it's been to see wrestling grow in the state of Arkansas already. I mean, man, when I was a kid, there wasn't even high school wrestling in Arkansas. And now here we are. I'm a, grown man, a grown adult. The high school wrestling scene has grown tremendously. We have college wrestling programs, like you were saying, Little Rock. Look how great they've done. They might even, as far as I'm concerned, I think they even have a national, title contender this year on their program, and how exciting that be to see that. So you got me excited about if you're wondering who I'm saying Stephen Little real quick. I realize he's in a really tough weight class, but I like that kid. That kid is tough. That kid has he gets so much better every season. So I do kind of have him as a dark horse, but that's another story for another time. All
And
right. So
can I
go
can
ahead.
I
Sorry.
jump in real quick,
You bet.
because like you said, back when we were in school, hell, when I was in college, even after I got out of college, it was really when I started coaching in 2007-8 at the college level that the high schools in Arkansas are really picking up. And one of my first recruits was Aaron Butler. He is the head wrestling coach for men and women at Little Rock Central. The big high school to integrate. It's been national stories for years. Um, and the reason I bring up Aaron Butler, he's been a member of the World Combat Wrestling Championship team. He's won an individual world title, but as a coach of somebody who's now a coach, absolutely immense pride. He ended up starting off at Neosho County for me, was, I believe, one of the first national qualifiers ever from the state of Arkansas. He moved on to Ouachita Baptist, and wrestled for, a coach that went up the ranks and coached at Army and now is at Oklahoma State. But Aaron Butler this past year got a National Wrestling Coaches Association National Coach of the Year for the whole country for his head coaching at for the girls. And so people need to be on high alert. I hate when people say, oh, they're from this state, oh, they're from that state. Wrestling is wrestling. I could look at a bracket. If you're a state champion, you're a state champion. Now, are some places a little more watered down? Sure, but they beat everybody that was put in front of them, and that still makes them a champion. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Aaron Butler and just again all the great stuff Arkansas is doing.
I will say this, they've already met me halfway, and I really appreciate that, but I'm gonna be greedy. I want them to meet me all the way. My number one pick is the University of Northern Michigan is my
Mm.
number one pick. Now that, like I said, they've already met me halfway, they do have a women's program. And what's really unique about Northern Michigan, and this could be why we won't ever see men's wrestling there, I don't know for sure. They are, to my knowledge, one of only three programs in the entire country that has a Greco-Roman team that they actually sponsor. It's actually a official team of the school. It's their men's Greco-Roman team. Um, a lot of people are unaware of this. They think that Northern Michigan has always been just a place for the Greco guys to go. But at one time, Northern Michigan actually did have an NCAA Division II team, and they were quite successful back in the late 70s up through the mid 1980s, producing NCAA qualifiers, NCAA Division II All Americans, so on and so forth. Um, I would love to see wrestling there again. I don't know exactly when they dropped. I think it was sometime like 94, 95, 96, somewhere in there is when they discontinued wrestling. Uh, I would like to see men's wrestling back there again. Not that I'm not thankful for their great women's presence and for also their Greco-Roman presence, but I'd also like to see D2 wrestling back there as well for the men.
Yeah, and I'm on the same tally as you. I think there's three. I think the other two are, and maybe we got two different ones. Who knows? Doan and I have Dubuque.
Yeah, that's why I had two. Yep,
Okay,
Doan and
cool.
Dubuque. Yep.
So yeah, a lot of excitement, like you said, with D2 wrestling for us. We listed the ones that we like. Um,
And are you
man,
like me? You had to really narrow it down.
I kind of got on a. The first thing I did was I wanted to veer from ones that like I knew dropped in my or in the last 2 3 decades. I really wanted to avoid that and really try to give new opportunities. Plus, I knew that you had some of that history that would probably come out.
Well, I'll be honest. I know when I talked about Truman State, I kind of laid into Jerry Wolmering, who is obviously not one of my favorite people that ever existed. Um, but if people are going to ask me like, Stonebreaker, how in the world did you leave off Nebraska Omaha? One of the main reasons I left off Nebraska Omaha is because I thought I might get a little too heated, and I thought I might refrain from using some pretty colorful language to describe I can't even think of the guy's name right now. But yeah, if
Oh,
I had to,
trust me,
yeah,
trust me. We've tried to forget Trev Alberts too,
yeah, that's
but
that's right. Yeah, I had a feeling that I might, get a phone call or something. You said what? That's
well,
that's one of the reasons I left them off.
and I'm gonna back you up on the real reason you left them off. They're not D2 anymore.
That's true. Yeah, there you
They're,
go. You're right.
yeah,
You're right.
so
Yes.
they're Division 1. And I tell you what, because I know you've attended D3s, I've attended D2s, and NAIs and JUCOs. I've never attended D1. Um,
Really? That surprises me.
yeah, it's not on. Oh, this might be another conversation for another day. It's not really on my bucket list. Neither is
Yeah.
Fargo. Um,
I've never been to Fargo either.
yeah, if I'm going to Fargo, it's probably for something else. But I do want to say these are we got excited about these. There's a lot of excitement brewing in D2. What we do have right now, um, I know you and I talked a little bit earlier, and I figure we have a little bit of time since this is episode 2 that we can maybe just do a brief discussion. I know I sent you a message yesterday. Defending champs Nebraska Carney are loaded. 3 JUCO national champs, not all Americans, national champs come into the fold. And we're talking upper weights. I believe it was, oh, I'm going to screw this up. I believe it's 57, 74, 84.
Yeah, that sounds right. But Surrey
And
and then Crespo and Job. Yep.
and then let's not forget about they have Crew Howard back at heavyweight who could possibly win it. He was my pick to win it last year. And, he had an unfortunate draw of a guy that was out for football first semester, didn't have a lot of wins, and then just had, um, finished third in his region. So Carney is pretty loaded. Now, if you get a chance, if some of you are just D1 people that like D1 wrestling, go to Ames, Iowa, because Iowa State is wrestling that Carney team this year. And I think you're going to see a little respect. Now, don't get me wrong. I do not think UNK is going to win because Iowa State is pretty loaded this year, too. But I want people to realize wrestling is wrestling. I know we've had some great conversations with Chuck Carney at the University of St. Mary. Elder statesman, previously was a head coach at the University of Oregon before they dropped. And I remember seeing somebody talk about D3 is the third best division. Um, well,
All that
it's called
response
D.
that he wrote.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
not. Well, and then there's a list out right now that shows like 8 of the 10 weight classes, pound for pound. NAIA was the best out of the small divisions. So, which I think would bring up a lot of great arguments. Um, but it's one of those deals that I think if you grab a team from this conference or from this division with this division, keep in mind Carney is going to wrestle NAIA juggernaut Grandview again this year, which was televised last year when Carney was a little bit beat up. Grandview comes to Carney this year. Hey, that's an hour and a half drive for me to be excited about. Um, and there's a lot of other great things happening. You look at Life and Lander down in the southeast. Lander's getting an opportunity to go battle on a warship against a D1 program. Um, so a lot of these D2s are pretty excitable right now. I know my alma mater, UCO, signed 3 Division I transfers in the offseason. Uh, and I also want to shout out a third MIAA team since I already got Carney and UCO. Central Missouri has been sneaking up on people under the tutelage of Cody Garcia. Cody Garcia comes from that coaching tree where he wrestled at Omaha under Mike Denny. So he knows how to run a tight ship. He's had success at the NAIA when he was at Bethany in Kansas. D2, man. Oh, it's like Mufasa. Whew.
Talk about Carney coming over to Iowa State this year. Last year they traveled to Cedar Falls to compete against Northern Iowa. And,
Eh,
they got beat. But, the thing about it is, yeah, they got beaten most of the matches, but they put up fights. I mean, their kids were not afraid to go out on the mat whatsoever. They showed that they belonged out there, and it was a lot of fun to watch that.
and I love it too when the D1s aren't afraid to schedule non D1. I get that there's like the ratings and all that, but man, at the end of the day, I really wish that we've got track wrestling where we can monitor who beats who. Why does it matter if this guy beats this guy and you beat this guy? Maybe there should be some flexibility in the ranks. I miss when I was wrestling D2 for UCO in the early 2000s. We went to the Central Missouri Open, and I will never forget Iowa showed up, Oklahoma State, OU, Illinois. And I remember a quarterfinal match. Looking back in retrospect now, you know, it's pretty exciting. Tion Ware was one of the people in this quarterfinal, and it was a barn burner. And I'm trying to think, it might have been his only loss, but it was a Tion Ware versus Zach Esposito in a quarterfinal at a Division II Open. But now we have a lot of these D1s that won't even send their guys to these competitions. And then I do think there were some people that helped boot out the non D1 teams from the Cliff Keens. I'm pretty adamant about that because it didn't look good on paper when the Emmett Wilsons of the world and the Tervel Delagnevs were whooping that ass, to put it boldly. But looking back at the Lopers of Kearney, you talk about last year they took on Northern Iowa, a pretty tough team. They also in a triangular. This triangular was pretty savage when you look back at it. Augustana, South Dakota, who ended up national runner-up in D2, and the University of Nebraska, the Huskers. And then, not to be outdone, they had a third D1 duel. They went and wrestled Little Rock, not a shabby team. It's exciting. I do like that there is a little more openness of wrestling these non D1 teams. Last year, long overdue. Pitt, Johnstown, and Pitt wrestled. I getting emotional on this one.
Yeah.
I just wish Pat Pecora was around to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you there. That's trying to bring tears into my eyes too, man. This isn't Barbara Walters. Let's try to refrain from crying.
Yeah.
But
So
I tell you what, I'm okay. You and I are going to disagree on this a little bit, but hear me out before you bring me your rebuttal. I'm okay with Cliff Keen Las Vegas being a Division 1 tournament because you see the best of the best there. Matter of fact, if I sat down and looked through my all my results from last season, I think there were two or three kids, I shouldn't call them kids, but two or three wrestlers last year that did not place at Cliff Keen that did All American at the national tournament. That tells you how tough Cliff Keen is. Now, with that said, both the Midlands and the Southern Scuffle have been severely watered down over the years, been being oversaturated. And so my thinking here is if a lot of these programs are just gonna send their backups and their third stringers and not send their starters to both the Midlands and the Southern Scuffle, why not open those up to D2s and D3s and NAIAs? You know what I mean? Like let's see the best
yeah,
of D2 and the best of D3 against the backups of the D1. I think that'd be a great way to build the program, build everything else because and this isn't me wanting to put anybody down. This isn't me wanting to be negative, so I hope nobody takes it that way. But when you spend money and time to go to a 2-day tournament and all you're seeing is a bunch of backups, that's really not that exciting. It's really not that much fun. You go there to see the starters. You go there because you want to see the guys that are ranked, the guys that are in the top 25. That's who you come to watch, right? So if you're not getting to see that, that doesn't make it as exciting. Now, if the Midlands and the Southern Scuffle both opened up their doors and invited more D2s and D3s and NAIAs, now you'd be wondering, like, hey, that kid's really, really, really good. He got third place in the D2s last year. He's ranked number one in D2s this year. Would he be good enough to wrestle D1? Could he? And that could actually give you the actual because right now everything is speculation, right? Maybe woulda, coulda, shoulda. We don't know.
yeah,
But if you actually
yeah,
got to see this like up close and personal, then you could actually answer those questions. Like for example, I've had a lot of people ask me, "How do you feel?" And I never pronounced this guy's name right, and I apologize about that ahead of time. But they've asked me, "Yo, Stonebreaker, how is that kid from Wartburg going to do this year for the
oh,
Iowa? Massimo Indini, or however he pronounces it, Indine, I think is how you pronounce that."
yep,
And I always tell them, I don't know. I have no idea how he's going to do. He was a three-time NCAA Division 3 national champion, but he hasn't wrestled any D1 competition yet. So I don't know how he's going to do. Now, people are like point to how he did in freestyle. That's all fine and dandy, but freestyle, regardless
yeah,
of what some people think, is not, collegiate wrestling at the same time. It's not the same grind. It's not the same, you
correct.
know, as what it is. So I don't know, but I would love to see more of that. So right now, I think we could call this our rambling episode because we both just kind of rambled on for a while. But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. And once again, believe it or not, we're running out of time again. Can you believe
Oh,
that? So
hey, well, that's good. I probably ought to get to my actual job then.
yeah, I got work here in a couple hours myself. So, all righty, Sways. On behalf of you and myself, JT1 Wrestle, thank you guys for listening today. And of course, as always, if there are some NCAA Division 2 teams that we did not mention in part one or part two, go ahead and throw them down. Write them in the comments. Let us know because we want to see wrestling grow as much as possible. Have a good day at work, Sways.
You too.